Hello everyone, I'm Irma Baker. Welcome to our show. As you know, if you've been watching us for any amount of time, we love to bring you interesting people and organizations and such from our area. And today we have a very special guest, someone you may know because she is also a host of a program here on WCTV, and that's Family Focus. By now you're probably figuring out that our guest is Joyce Johnson. But we have some surprises for you today in what we're going to talk about. Joyce, it's so wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you, and I don't mind sitting on this side of the room, and I loved your open. I was watching that. I think I need to add that to my show. Add my own special open. Yours is very nice. Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and I do have to give credit for the opening to Joanna. She made that opening.
Well, then I'm going to be on it. Yeah, with her.
We'll warn Joanna that you're going to be coming to see her.
I need a better open,
Well, it is wonderful to have you, and I know you have a very popular show on WCTV, Family Focus. I mean, Family Focus, that's something that everyone is interested in because somewhere along the line, maybe not so much anymore with some of our viewers, but family is always important. And you're taking it from a different angle in our show today because we're not here to talk about Family Focus. We're here to talk about your experiences and the book that you've written about being a caregiver. Fill us in a little bit about how you came to be a caregiver.
Well, I can tell you that I have actually been a caregiver all of my life. My mother had always had mental health issues that just kind of got worse with time. So I've always sort of been an adult taking care of my mother. And it was only when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's that we put a name to it. She didn't do counseling. She didn't do medication. So we grew up with this chaos. We grew up in chaos. And my mother was a German war bride. She met my father when he was stationed over there. They married after their third date. She didn't even speak English. It's just incredible. She's this beautiful little German Fraulein who spoke no English. She was living in abject poverty, sharing a bed with her mother and sister in a tiny apartment with no food. But marrying an American was the step up for them. But she came here with many, many issues and many problems, mental health issues that were never addressed.
Well, I would think that someone from her situation, just having been through the war and all the anguish that comes along with that, along with the fear and the deprivation and such, it had to have an effect on people.
Well, it did. And I can tell you almost all of my grandmother's family was murdered. The only reason she survived was because she fled Königsberg Ostpreußen with my mother and her sister. The rest of her family was killed by Russian soldiers who took over their farm, and they had nothing. And then her husband, my mother's father, was shot and killed by a sniper during World War II. So they grew up without a father. They grew up in very poor conditions. I mean, World War II Germany was not a fun place to be. And with that said, all of that trauma, all of it came here when she married my father. And I always felt like I was responsible for her, always, as her daughter. Now, I had an older brother, but it was me that was caregiving for them. And my father had survived colon cancer, but then he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer in 2011. And I was caring for him, and then she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So we had a double whammy, someone who was physically impaired, and then my mother, who could not help with anything.
So both of them were relying on you to be their caregiver during that time.
Yes, and I think you'll find, perhaps as caregivers out there, and as I've talked to so many over the years, it is usually one family member who bears the brunt of care. And my parents absolutely refused to have hired help in the house. Whenever I would try to hire someone to come in and help out, they would send them home and say, we don't need help. Joyce can do it. Joyce will take care of it. So you're in this situation where you're trying to do everything. And I have 3 children. I have this other life. I mean, I was working. It was a no-win situation. It was exhausting. But again, the more people I talk to, they all can relate to this.
You called your book Leaving Crazy Behind. And what you're illustrating now or describing now really is a form of living in a crazy world. So, did you realize it at the time?
Yes, I did. I realized it at the time that this was an incredible situation, but I tried to keep my sense of humor about it. You know, my mother did and said crazy things all of my life. At one point, because we had to take her with us every time my father was hospitalized or whenever there was a medical emergency, I had no one else to watch her, so we'd take her with us. And one time we were at one of his appointments, and there were all of these disabled vets. We were sitting out there in the waiting room waiting to get my father in, and my mother will blurt things out, as many people with Alzheimer's do. So you would hear her, there's a man in a wheelchair sitting there, and my mother would say, "That looks like a lot of fun spinning around like that." I was mortified. I looked at her and said, "Mom, shh, quiet, quiet, quiet." And she goes, "What do you mean? All I said was," and she'd say it again. And the guy would say, "Oh, it's not fun, lady, you know, I'm in a wheelchair." And we would be like, oh my gosh, she would say and do the most inappropriate things, but that's part of the disease. But it was a double whammy. And you'll find a lot of people said, "Hey, why didn't you just put them in?" My father refused to go into a nursing home and refused that. He wanted to die at home, which I totally understood. And my promise to him was that that would happen. But it was killing me. As you know, as a caregiver, you're depleted. There's nothing left of you. You're doing everything.
I can certainly understand that, having gone through it with my brother and my mother.
And how long did that go on?
Oh, years for each of them.
Yes.
Not as a lifetime like you've had, but certainly years of not being able to change the situation. Not only do you have to deal with it, but you have to see that it's only going to get worse. So when you talk about leaving crazy behind, yes, there are times when you really feel like you're in a crazy world. So how did you get through it?
Well, I'm still going through it. I'm still dealing with things that were her. You know, I had to clean out her home. Even after I put my mother in, because I was running out of money, after my father died, the first thing I did was hire one of his aides to help me out to do that. So I was becoming like a corporation in the home. I had hired all of these people to help, and I was in charge of them and paying them, and you know, they wouldn't show, or they didn't have, you know, you had all the things that happen when you're running a corporation, except it was in their house. So I still had to deal with many things from that time. As it turns out, my father did die at home on the same day that his father died 50 years later, on the same day, in a hospital room in his house. But then I knew that we went through the money pretty quick. My father had been such a saver. He worked in a bank, had saved all of his life. All of that went to the care. You're spending thousands of dollars a month on aids and special drinks, nutritional drinks, to keep them eating and all of this. And I knew, though, once my mom was in a nursing home, that would be the end for her. I knew the care would never be the same. And it wasn't. She got COVID and died in 2020. And there was no, also complications. I mean, she had stopped eating, but we weren't allowed to see her. And while some people could have Zoom calls, she didn't do well on Zoom calls. She didn't do well with plexiglass. She would try to run into it. She wouldn't wear a mask. She has Alzheimer's. So all of those things that people would take for granted, you couldn't do. So
They were not part of her world.
No. And very often they'd say, come shower her, she won't go in, she's just refusing. So I would go in my work clothes and go in there and give her a shower before work and try to do what I could. So even when you put her into a place where she is cared for, you still have to be very hands-on and you still have to be very vigilant. I would tell any caregiver to be very vigilant in your loved one's care, no matter what, fighting for them.
What kind of obstacles, or maybe I should say, even though that you had been a caregiver of some kind all your life, one way or another, what were the things that surprised you as your father's condition deteriorated and later as your mother's condition deteriorated? And how did you get through it?
I was surprised a bit at the medical community. At one point, my father had an infection on his toe and was hospitalized. And this was just before the Christmas holiday. And all he needed to have was his toenails clipped. And they wouldn't release him from the hospital. And I said, I'm going to get some toenail clippers and I'm going to do it myself. And I remember saying, you mean there's no doctor? They said, well, it's the holiday. A lot of people aren't working. I said, we're going to find someone to do this so he can come home. And I found myself once again having to fight to do something so simple. And that's what you have to do. I was surprised at all of the people that had been in their life that they never heard from again. Once they needed a lot of care, people drop out of your life. Friends, family, relatives, they no longer are part of that. And that is where that abandonment feeling comes that many caregivers have, because relatives that should be helping, you'll never hear from them again. Mm-hmm. People that used to call them and check on them don't stop over. It's as if it ends. And you notice it because you think, why can't they just call for 5 minutes and talk to them? But they don't. They just stop. You know, I've had some say, oh, your mother sounds like a broken record. She's da-da-da. It's like, it's okay. Talk to her. Just give her 5 minutes. Cheer her up. It makes such a difference.
It makes a difference in that moment. Mm-hmm. And whether they remember it or not, mm-hmm. at that moment when it's happening,
yes,
it is uplifting to them and it is something that gives them something to go on.
Mm-hmm. Give caregivers a break. That's the other thing. If you have a half a day, if you have 2 hours, give them 2 hours where they can go shopping without the loved one, where they can have some time to themselves. For me, it was just trying to get home and take care of my own family. It was crazy. It was a crazy existence.
That leads us right into the book itself. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that book is available through Amazon Kindle,
Amazon
right?
Kindle, right. It is free if you are a Kindle subscriber. And it is on e-edition, in ebook. And again, I wrote the book for caregivers. I didn't write it to get publicity. I didn't write it to make money. I wrote it because it started as a journal out of frustration, because I needed a voice. I needed to write down what was happening because it's the only way I could work through it. It is how I coped. You would ask, how do you cope with this? I'm a writer. I like to write. I put down those thoughts. And what I realized was I'm writing the experience that many other people are feeling that maybe can't express. We had good days, we had bad days, but somehow you can live through it. And I want people to know this. As bad as things get, and things got really bad with 2 people in one house that needed so much care, a dying dad and a mom with Alzheimer's, you can live through it.
It had to be a very anxious time and fearful time, because anytime you left them, you never knew for sure how they were being cared for or what they might do. So you couldn't really just walk away from it.
Not only could I not walk away from it, but I would have people in the house all the time, and my mom would still get out. And at one time at 2 in the morning, I got a call from the police department. Hey, your mom's out there with a teddy bear in her robe, standing on the corner of the street. And it's like, but there's people in the house, but they fell asleep, or they're tired. It's 2 in the morning. We had monitors in the house so they could hear, but they're tired. They're asleep. It happens. And that's when she would get out. She would climb out windows. One time she was having some work done on her kitchen. I brought her over to my house. And of course, she didn't want to be there. She wanted to go home. So I'm sitting in one room. She's napping, allegedly, on the porch. I get up. I'm helping my son with his homework. She's gone. She had walked all the way to a corner salon and had them call a ride for her. She still had a credit card that was working at that time and took a ride, like a cab ride, didn't know about Uber, took a cab ride home and said, my husband is waiting for me at home, I need to get home. And I knew she would be going home. Somehow she would either walk there or get there. And so that's where I had her neighbor meet up with her, and that's where I went to get her again. It was that kind of stuff all the time.
It is amazing what things are clear to someone in that condition and other things that have totally blanked out of their minds.
Oh yeah, you don't know what they're going to say. And again, they're not intentionally. My mom was a very nonviolent, loving person, but that irritability that comes with Alzheimer's, being watched, she didn't like to have people around her all the time. She wanted to walk to the store, so you'd go chasing after her and go find. I mean, 2 minutes, she could get far. The thing is, she was very mobile. It wasn't like she was handicapped. She moved quicker than me. And she would slip out the door and start walking, so you'd be driving around looking for her. We did that all the time.
So what are the, I'll say, suggestions that you give to people about being a caregiver?
Recruit as much help as you can get in advance, whether your loved one wants this or not. I think one of my mistakes was not hiring people and allowing my father to send them home. Allowing him to say, my father would say, I don't want this young girl taking care of me. I'm an old man. I don't want this young girl. It's like, but it helps me. And they don't look at it that way. They look at it from their perspective, of course. But I would have ignored those wishes. I should have ignored those wishes because it was killing me. I was diagnosed with cancer when all of this was going on. I had my own battles. I had my own struggles, and I totally neglected myself to take care of them. Recruit an army of people, even if you have to hire this army to help you out.
How can you do it if you can't afford to hire?
You're going to need state aid. There are some programs available, and you will find there are, for instance, hospice is available to people who've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. People are not aware of that. Because it is considered terminal, you can get hospice help, which I started using for my mom, believe it or not, when she was put in the nursing home, because I knew she was not going to get a lot of care. I knew they were not going to do the stuff that I did when I would go visit. And hospice was able to go and help out at least once a week and check on her, make sure she's getting a shower, make sure her hair is getting brushed, make sure things are happening. So hospice is a service that is free, and you can use them when you have a loved one with Alzheimer's.
How do you find the people that you have to come to rely on?
Interestingly enough, I could almost never depend on some of the services where you hire people. What I did is my sons were very young at the time. I have 3 sons. Their girlfriends, their friends. I would say, who would like to make some money and stay with my mom? She loved young people. And they had the energy. They could take her to the store. They could take her to the mall. I had one of my son's ex-girlfriends who I hired, and she would take her to Alzheimer's walks and take her to see Santa. She loved it. They can do that. And again, she's not a licensed caregiver, but she offered something that the caregivers wouldn't, and that is attention and taking her out to do things. A lot of the caregivers would just be there, sitting there, some of them on their phones. I would walk in at different times. I had one woman say, well, would you rather I just sit and talk to your mom, or should I, do you want me not to give her a shower anymore? I said, why would I ever do that? She needs to have a shower. We need you to help. So you don't know necessarily some of the people that, even if you do research on them and check them out, some of them are not going to be very good when they're there. So you have to be very hands-on. There is no day off for the caregiver.
And with no day off for the caregiver, then what does that do to the emotions, the physical stamina, the mental condition of the caregiver?
It deteriorates very fast. You have a very hard time focusing. Many car rides home, you'll be crying. Many times you're just so overwhelmed with the amount of things that you have to do, and the amount of things, for instance, even dealing with insurance. Between dealing with my father's insurance company and my mother's, and dealing with their prescriptions and things not being filled, it's overwhelming. It's just overwhelming for any one person.
So how did you get through it? How did you really go day to day to day? And you were running between two households. You had all of this.
And working. I was working.
And you were working, yes, and you were working.
I did that day to day. I lived minute by minute, second by second. You know what you have to do, and you just do it, just like anything else. You just do it because you have to. There's no one else that's going to pick this up. And you can't depend. I have talked to more than one person with many siblings or people with siblings, and their siblings don't help at all. They're not there in the picture at all. They'll even tell you they're not going to help. So there you are. What do you do?
So you're also dealing, in addition to the immediate care that you need to give, both to the person to whom you're giving care and taking care of yourself, you're also dealing then with family conflict.
Very much so. Very much so. And I would say for many families, this divides you. This is the test, because, even if you don't fight with your family growing up, I considered myself an easygoing person, but you're arguing with people, and then when they give their criticism of what you're doing, or they're telling you what you should be doing while they're on vacation. I loved those calls. While they're on vacation, they're telling you what you should be doing. It's like, oh, how nice is that? That's a wonderful thing to happen. You don't want to deal with that. But I encourage everyone, read the book. Leaving Crazy Behind is for any caregiver who is at the end of their rope, because there is hope. And again, it's free. If you are an Amazon Kindle member, you don't have to pay a dime for it. Or if you want to just buy it the online edition, it's $9.95, I think. But it is worth relating to, because you'll know you're not alone, ever.
And that, I think, is the thing that you feel the most, is no matter how many people you can hire, no matter how many people you are told, oh, go here, go there, they'll help you. You're still comes down to you.
It's you. Yeah.
You're it.
And in truth, you'll never leave crazy behind. It's always a part of you. It's always a part of you. These are my mom's necklaces. This is her pin. This is her skirt. You see, there's always a part that is with me, no matter what.
It really grabs at anyone who finds themselves in that situation. And, let's face it, just about everyone at some kind who has a family bond of any kind is going to face this in one way or another.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, it is so common. It is, all of us, as we age, all of us, I have friends that don't have kids, that never married, said, what should I do? I said, long-term health care, long-term health planning. I said, don't feel like you're going to be abandoned, but make a plan. Make a plan for yourself. My father thought my mom would be fine with the money he saved. It wasn't. It was gone in a year. Because the cost is so astronomical to hire help.
How can people, what do I want to, I guess I want to ask, did you have any little ways of boosting yourself?
To me, a bubble bath. And I actually opened the book with, I'm taking a bath, a bubble bath. That was my only pleasure at the time. Well, that's a simple pleasure, but you take it when you can.
Oh, yes.
You take it when you can.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And it has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Having you with us.
Thank you.
It is so
I'll have
nice.
to have you on my show.
Well,
we'll
try
We'll talk about whatever you want.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We'll do that. But Joyce, it's been so great having you here.
Thank you.
And I hope many people tune in to Family Focus.
Thank you.
And get your book.
Thank you.
The Leaving Crazy Behind. And we are not leaving you behind. We want you to tune in every time for RSVP and for Family Focus. And you have a wonderful day. It's been great having you viewing us today. Have a good day.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.